Think we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's WastewaterSCAN stakeholder meeting. My name's Marlene. I'm an assistant professor at Emory and one of the leads of the WastewaterSCAN program. Allie, who's my co-lead, isn't here today, but we'll be hearing a little bit from Amanda and Stephen, who are more frequently chatting you and emailing you and behind the scenes. And so anyway, give them a warm welcome for helping me present today. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so just a little bit of a reminder, as always, of who we are. WastewaterSCAN is a national effort based at Stanford to build a national network for wastewater monitoring using consistent methods for monitoring infectious diseases. And our goal is to inform public health responses locally and nationally, and none of this program would be possible or worth doing without all of you. So thank you, as always, for being here. If you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're coming from in the chat. We always like to kind of get some conversation going there and see who's here today. A lot of very familiar faces. So again, I just introduced myself. My name's Marlene. I'm from Emory, and then Allie from Stanford is our other program director. Our partners are Verily for recruiting, logistics, laboratory stuff. You ship your samples to them, so you know them well, and NLC for capacity building. And then, like I said, all of you are valued partners at utilities and public health and communities who make this work possible. So thank you again for being here. Just going to give a little bit of an overview of where we are at. So at this point, here's our map of what's represented in the WastewaterSCAN program right now. We have 191 plants that are sampling, and that represents 13.5% of the US population. So a pretty amazing slice that we have covered all across the country, over 45 million people, and across 41 states. So you will see yourself represented somewhere on this map. And thank you again for sharing your samples with us. Right now, what are we currently monitoring? We haven't had any recent changes in what we are monitoring. So we have our important seasonal and emerging respiratory pathogens, SARS-CoV-2, influenza A and B, and RSV, some of our very common suspects that we talk about a lot, human metapneumovirus, enterovirus D68, and human parainfluenza as well. We have important enteric pathogens, rotavirus and human norovirus G2. And then our kind of emerging and outbreak pathogens of concern, our final eclectic group that includes Candida auris, hepatitis A, and Mpox. We're also doing sequencing for SARS-CoV-2 from about 30 sites. As most of you know, that's something that is a little bit newer on the website, and we'll talk about some of the most recent results from that in a couple minutes. We also measure these controls, PMMOV and bovine coronavirus, on all of our samples. So remember that when you look at results for your site, results for all of these different targets are available to you. We just want to remind you that all of our protocols and papers are publicly available. It's really important to us to make sure that our methods and our results are all sort of openly available and accessible to you. So we're going to email out these slides as always, but here are a bunch of QR codes if you want to follow them and look at any of the methods that we have and some of the supporting evidence that allows us to include this monitoring for these targets as part of our regular public health program. We also wanted to just share again that we have, beyond those protocols, we have kind of made a better list. Thank you, Amanda, for putting this together, of all of our peer-reviewed scientific publications. So Amanda put the link to this in the chat. But just to make it really easily accessible, now we have this list of all of the peer-reviewed publications that are using SCAN and WastewaterSCAN data. So we'll keep this, it's a Google Doc, so we'll keep it updated as new things are added. But if you're looking for, well, what exactly is WastewaterSCAN doing to monitor EVD68, and what does that data mean? Or, most recently we have this new paper, which is bullet number 2 here, this new paper alert on observations of RSV and wastewater solids across the United States. So really looking at across the whole country, the relationship between wastewater concentrations of RSV and positivity data and hospitalization data. So, what is some of the evidence for how this data works with some of our more traditional metrics for infectious disease surveillance? All of that was in this publication list here, and the link to the new RSV paper. Amanda's put that in the chat. And then we also have a new fact sheet that we emailed this out to everybody. I believe it was last week, but it's linked again here in the chat. And so this fact sheet summarizes a previous paper that was published at the end of last year that we did that's a lot like this new RSV paper, but for influenza, looking at the relationship between the results that we get in wastewater all across the country and the hospitalization, ILI, positivity rate, et cetera, data. I hope that this fact sheet is helpful to you. We would love to hear your feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts on, how you're able to use this. Our goal is to summarize some of this research that makes it accessible without you having to read the whole paper. And so we're planning to do more of these so that we have something that can be easily shareable, either for, your leadership or for your use internally, thinking about how you might use this information. And then also something that, feel free to link this resource to members of your community or others that you work with to kind of share that message on. It's meant to be a resource for you. So if you have feedback or thoughts about it or things you'd particularly like to see communicated in this kind of format, we would love for you to let us know, because we are working on doing more of these. And I'm going to pass it to Stephen now to talk a little bit about the wastewater categories.
Great, thank you. So we're just going to do a quick recap on what these categories do. So in short, there's quite a few different metrics you can look at for your wastewater treatment plants and your regions. We're trying to quickly communicate that using just one category. So it is summarizing the trends, so whether your concentrations are increasing, decreasing, or not changing significantly. It's looking at the levels, so whether the concentrations you're seeing are in the top third, the middle third, or the bottom third of concentrations for that pathogen for the past year, as well as some of the category archetypes use the frequency detection. For example, for our rare targets, we're mostly looking at how frequently we're detecting them. And we have three main archetypes. You may have received an email from us recently, and you can see on this slide, we now have quite a few more pathogens that are included in this. We can explain it at another time, but in short, we did some testing with rotavirus, parainfluenza, EBD68, C. auris, and hepatitis A to see which of these archetypes best fits each of these pathogens. And have put rotavirus and parainfluenza in the commonly detected bucket, and then the remaining in the rarely detected bucket. And now you can go to the dashboard and you can actually see these results for yourself. So you can get these summaries nationwide at your region levels, as well as for your particular treatment plants.
Okay, so now let's kind of go over the current wastewater categories. So these categories were pulled from the data.WastewaterSCAN website this morning, and they represent data through March 6th, so as of 2 days ago. So as a reminder, you can find the categorization methodology on the About page of the website. Stephen went over it briefly, but if you want more detail, it's on the About page. So here on the left-hand side of the screen, we have the national wastewater categories for all 11 pathogens we monitor. And on the right, we've pulled quick plots for the aggregated national lines for SARS-CoV-2, influenza A and B, RSV, human metapneumovirus, and neurovirus. So if we go back to the table on the left, we currently see that SARS-CoV-2, influenza A, influenza B, RSV are all in the high category, and the reasons vary slightly, but the common theme across all of these is that the concentrations are still relatively high for all of these pathogens. For human metapneumovirus, we're in the low category, and that's because the pathogen is not currently in a seasonal onset for our nationally aggregated data. Influenza A, influenza B, and RSV are in onset because more than 50% of sites have hit that threshold that we require. We have parainfluenza. So parainfluenza is in a high category because it's trending upwards and relatively high concentrations at the moment. EVD 68 is in the low categorization because we've had very few positive samples. Less than 6% of samples have been positive in the last 10 days. Both neurovirus and rotavirus are in the high category. They have relatively high concentrations. Neurovirus is continuing to trend upwards, as you can see in the plot on the right, and rotavirus currently has no trend but high concentrations. Next up, we have Mpox. Once again, very few positive detections. We've only had one positive detection in the last 10 days. Cioris, very few positive detections again. Less than 1% of samples have been positive in the last 10 days. And Hep A is very few positive detections. Only 13% of samples have been positive. Next slide. So we're going to dive into SARS-CoV-2 first. So the median concentration over the last 21 days has been around 98,000. Compared to about a month ago, the median concentration was over 200,000 copies per gram. So we've seen a pretty big decrease, not only at the national level, but at these regional levels. All of these plots on the right kind of mirror each other's pattern. We're seeing a pretty big decrease in concentrations, both in the Midwest, Northeast, South, and West. And we saw the big peak kind of happen at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. Next slide. So here is the sequencing, the aggregated plot on the right. And as you can see, J1, which is this pink reddish color, is making up the biggest proportion of this stacked bar chart. So currently we're seeing 94.5% of what we're sequencing is JN1, which is what we would expect at this moment. It should be noted that this last data is from February 24th. We have a 1 to 2 week delay, and that's just due to all the processes that have to go on in the lab in order to get the results to us. Just a quick note here, there are 2 bars that are grayed out, and these bars will eventually come back with data. We have data, but we're going through a QA/QC process, so these will be populated at a later date. Next slide. Here is the SARS-CoV-2 category map. So as you can see in the West, we're currently in a medium category, which is the yellow, but the other 3 regions are orange, so they are still in that high category. We're still seeing a majority of sites in the high wastewater category, so that are orange, but we're seeing more and more go down to low, which is matching what we're seeing in those plots. Next up, we have RSV. So we currently have the wastewater concentration plot on the left, and then on the right, we have the positivity rate plot, which is pulled from NERVS data from the CDC. There's a 1 to 2 week delay in the positivity rate data that we get from the CDC, but as you can see, these are strikingly similar in the shape that we're seeing here, where we had a peak at the end of last year, and we're coming down. So currently, 71% of the samples, we've had positive detections. Compare that to last month when 88% of the samples had positive detections. So we're seeing less and less detections. Next. Here is the category map. So we currently see that the West, Midwest, and Northeast are in a high category, and the South has entered a low categorization, which suggests that we're approaching the end of RSV season. Next up, we have influenza A. So we've had a similar thing. We've got the wastewater concentration plot on the left and the positivity rate with data pulled from NERVS on the right. Similar general pattern that we see here. We currently have 88% of samples that have been positive detection compared to last month when there was over 90% of samples. So we're slowly seeing less and less positive detections. Next. And here we see that all regions are in that high categorization. You see a lot of orange on this map, and that's because we have, over half of our samples and sites are in that high categorization. All of this data can be found if you just go to data.wastewaterscan. Like I said, this was pulled from this morning, but if you look at it later today and your sites had updated data, you're able to see how your category changes throughout the day. Next. Next up, we have influenza B. So currently, we've seen an uptick in our influenza B positive detections across all wastewater scan sites. Currently, 96% of samples are testing positive for influenza B. If we compare that to the previous month, it was only about 60%. So we're seeing more and more influenza B in every sample that we're getting from across the country. And this is matching the positivity rates that we are seeing with data pulled from NERVs. Next. Here's the categorization map. As you can see, pretty much every site is in a high categorization for influenza B at the moment. Next. Next up, we have human metapneumovirus. So we currently have 60% of samples have a positive detection rate. In February, only 44% of samples had positive detections, and the pattern is mirrored in the wastewater plot on the left, and then the CDC positivity rate on the right. We're seeing an uptick, and that can be seen here as well in the categorization map, where the West is currently the only region we have that is in a high category. But we are starting to see more and more sites in the Midwest and South and Northeast enter that high categorization. And the last pathogen we're going to go over for the sake of time is neurovirus. When we send out the slides, there'll be information on parainfluenza, Hep A, Mpox, C. auris, rotavirus, EVD68, but we're going to stop with neurovirus today so we can get to questions. So neurovirus currently is in the high categorization, and concentrations are relatively high. The median concentration is over 11 million. Just for reference, in the past month, it was around 10 million copies per gram. So we're continuing to see higher and higher concentrations across all wastewater scan sites. Once again, you have the aggregated wastewater plot on the left, and then the positivity rate data on the right, strikingly similar shape. Next. And here is the map of fair number of sites are in the high categorization, and all regions across WastewaterSCAN are in the high categorization. And I'm going to hand it back to Marlene, and she's going to go over a couple of administrative items.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again to Amanda and Stephen for sharing all of that today, which is really their work that they've done this past week and for months and years now for the WastewaterSCAN program. You should have received an email from us about it this week, but we are planning a Wastewater Works social media series. If you have not checked out our social media, please do. We try to keep up with updates about the program, interesting tidbits about what is going on, amplifying kind of other work that's happening in the space. And we also produce a weekly data update thread that goes out on Thursdays. So it gives the highlights, not in as much depth as we go over in these meetings, of course, or in the newsletters, but gives some highlights of what our most recent data updates are. So, please check us out. The website has links to all of our socials. And we are, again, so appreciative of all of your work that enables this program and enables our success and enables us to have this information to share with you and with your communities. And we would really like to recognize the important contributions of our utilities through this new social media series. So thank you. Some of you have already reached out and said you're interested. So don't worry, we have you down and we will, be getting back to you. But if you are interested in participating in the series and you haven't already told us that, please email us and we will reach back out to you with details. We're excited to be able to kind of highlight, again, your contributions in this way. And it's a lot of fun. We've got a team of people who are going to work on making this happen and making it really cool. And you can see, again, from what's already on our socials, what kind of what the vibe is of what we're sharing, and like, follow. And my daughter the other day, I took a video of her and she goes, like and follow for more. And I was like, how do you know that? And apparently it's because they watched a video in school. So watch out for that. But do wastewater utilities, please like and follow for more, and email us if you're interested in being part of this series. And I think that's it for today. So if you have any questions, we would love to answer them. Our next meeting will be on April 12th. I'm going to stop sharing and you can raise your hand or shout out or put a question in the chat. And we will do our best to answer. One question that we've gotten, of course, is about sort of the future plans for the program. I mentioned this in our last meeting, but our current funding is going to take us through June of this year. We greatly appreciate your participation and hope you continue to be a part of this program. We'll be able to share some more information about beyond June. Hopefully in the next few weeks, you'll be hearing from us, but right now we don't have a kind of further update for you.